Hi, everybody. Today we're going to look at reason number 12 in a gospel primer. Reason number 12 to rehearse the gospel to ourselves daily. We're actually going to slow down a little bit today. I know we've been going slow already, but I'm not even going to make it through the entire one-page meditation today because there is so much good stuff jammed into this one. I want to make sure we slow down and savor it for a little bit. All right, so here we go. The gospel is not just a message of reconciliation with God, but it also heralds the reconciliation of all believers to one another in Christ. Through the death of Christ, God has brought peace where there was once hostility, and he has broken down the racial, economic, and social barriers that once divided us outside of Christ. Okay? And so he refers to Ephesians chapter 2. So look at Ephesians chapter 2, and in verse 12... verse 13, it says, "But now, in Christ Jesus, you who once were far off have been brought near by the blood of Christ." So right before that, he says, we apart from Christ, we were without God and we had no hope in the world. And then he says, "But now in Christ Jesus, you who were once far off have been brought near by the blood of Christ." That's talking about our reconciliation to God. So apart from Christ, we are far from God. We don't have any hope. We're without God in this world. And then through the death of Christ, he reconciles us into relationship with God. But that's not the only reconciliation that the death of Christ accomplished. So listen to verse 14. "For he himself," that's Jesus, "is our peace, who has made us both one and has broken down in his flesh the dividing wall of hostility." So here he's talking about Jews and Gentiles who were divided. Is the biggest divide, racial, religious, social divide you could imagine in the ancient Near East. Jews and Gentiles did not mix. They did not eat together. They did not work together. They were separate. All right. And there was hostility between them. So, but Jesus himself is our peace, who has made us both one and has broken down in his flesh the dividing wall of hostility by abolishing the law of commandments expressed in ordinances, so that he might create in himself one new man in place of the two, so making peace, and might reconcile us both to God, so that's reconciliation to God, in one body, that's reconciliation to each other, through the cross, thereby killing the hostility. All right, so we're reconciled to God, verse 13. We're reconciled to each other, that's verses 14 through 16. So there were all kinds of hostility between Jews and Gentiles. They were not together. They were not united. They were not one. All right. But now, because of Christ, they are together. So Jesus has brought them together. It says in verse 15 that Jesus makes one new man or one new people out of these two previously divided peoples. In verse 16, he talks about one body. So he's brought Jews and Gentiles together in one body. That's a body moves together. A body is diverse, but it walks and goes in the same direction. So God has brought this profound and deep and real unity. And the way he's done it is through Jesus. In verse 14, it says, "He himself is our peace." So Jesus is the one that brings people who are different together. And in verse 18, he says, "For through him we both have access in one spirit to the Father." So Jesus brings us together by reconciling people who are very different, who normally wouldn't be together. We come together because of Jesus and because he brings us both to God. And the way he does that, verse 16, is through the cross. He might reconcile us both to God in one body through the cross, thereby killing the hostility. So now the main reality in our lives is Jesus Christ, if you're a Christian. Maybe before, the main thing was my ethnic identity or my religious identity or my social markers or my socioeconomic status, or maybe that I'm old or older and live in this kind of community, or maybe that I'm younger and am pursuing this kind of career, or maybe it's that I speak this language, or from this nation, or are wealthy, or are poor, or are male, or are female, or are involved in homeschooling, or involved in public schooling. And a lot of these can be markers that can kind of divide people. And What Jesus does, he comes in, and whatever was kind of a big part of your identity, how you grew up, what your personality type is maybe, or where you live, or what your culture's like, or what kind of music you like, or what kind of food you like, all these identity markers, all of them, he doesn't obliterate all of them. Some of them he does, but he doesn't obliterate all of them. But what happens is that he becomes the main reality in our life. He becomes the most important thing. And so in Galatians 3:28, it says, there is neither Jew nor Greek, there is neither slave nor free, there is neither male nor female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. So he's not saying that there's no males or females anymore. He still addresses males and females. He's not saying that, that there's not, at this time, there weren't slave or free people. What he's saying is that that's not your main identity. We are all one in Christ. That's our main identity. That's who we are. And so that brings us together. So we've all been saved by the same Jesus. Let me close with this illustration. There can be all kinds of disunity and lack of reconciliation in our lives, right? You could think of it almost like on an airplane, the difference, the separation between first class and coach, all right? And some people have paid to be up there, and some people have paid to be back here, and you aren't supposed to mix, right? Because you earned it. You paid this, or you flew enough miles to where you got upgraded to there, and the people stay up there and the people stay back there, and there's two different groups, two different divides. And sometimes that's how we can think of ourselves. Like, this is who I am. This is how I've gotten here. But when we come to Christ, what we realize is the most important thing about ourselves is nothing that we earned and nothing that we did. It was given to us as a gift by Jesus. It was because of his death. And so whoever you are, wherever you're from, we are brought together. It's more like we're people who were lost on a mountain, and maybe you were lost in a different place than me, and a giant snowstorm came, and a rescue helicopter came to find us. And they found you first, and you got on that helicopter, and you're in the plane, and you're so happy and rejoicing. And then they come down over to my group, and we get into the plane, and now we're saved, and we're not going to die anymore. And so two groups of people who maybe are totally different in a lot of ways, but we're united, and we're on the same level, and we can rejoice together, and we're in the same plane because we've been saved in the same way. And that's what Jesus does. He brings people who would normally not be together, and we love each other deeply because of Jesus Christ.